My name is Elena Brooks, and the first time I realized my husband was in love with another woman, I was folding his shirts, not finding lipstick, not reading messages, not catching him in a hotel room. I was standing in our laundry room on a quiet Tuesday night when I noticed something strange. Daniel had started buying new clothes, expensive ones, slimmer cuts, sharper colors, the kind of clothes people buy when they suddenly care how they look again. At first, I told myself it meant nothing. People change. People reinvent themselves, especially in their 40s. But then I picked up one of his dress shirts and smelled perfume. Not mine. Something softer, warmer, and feminine in a way that instantly made my stomach tighten. I stood there for almost a full minute, holding that shirt, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But deep down, I already knew. I just didn't know the truth yet, and the truth was far worse than cheating. Because the woman who stole my husband wasn't just sleeping with him. She was helping him plan the destruction of my entire life. She wanted my marriage, my home, my money, my future. And in the end, she lost everything because of a $1 acquisition she never saw coming. But before that happened, before the lawyers, before the courtroom, before the public humiliation, there was love, or at least what I thought was love. If you enjoy emotional, true-style stories about betrayal, family drama, revenge, hidden secrets, and justice, subscribe now, because this story nearly destroyed me. And maybe telling it is the only reason I finally healed. I met Daniel when I was 22 years old. Back then, he looked like certainty, confident, funny, charming, the kind of man who walked into rooms like he already belonged there. People naturally trusted him, including me. I grew up in a quiet family where emotions stayed hidden. My father believed silence solved problems. My mother believed endurance was love. So when Daniel entered my life laughing loudly, speaking confidently, touching my hand like I mattered, I thought I had finally found safety. Looking back now, I realized something painful. Women raised to survive emotional neglect often mistake attention for love. And I loved Daniel deeply, completely, dangerously. For years, our marriage looked perfect from the outside. Beautiful home, 2 children, vacations, anniversary dinners, holiday photos. Everything social media teaches people to associate with happiness. But private loneliness hides easily behind public smiles. Especially for women. I spent years carrying invisible emotional weight inside our marriage. Remembering appointments, managing birthdays, supporting Daniel emotionally, protecting the kids from stress, fixing arguments before they exploded. Daniel used to joke that I was the glue holding the family together. At the time, I smiled when he said it. Now I understand something different. People only call you glue when they expect you to hold broken things together forever. And eventually, glue cracks. The first warning came almost a year before our separation. Daniel started changing in small ways, tiny ways, ways most people would ignore. He suddenly cared about fitness again, started whitening his teeth, bought expensive watches, ironed shirts he normally threw onto chairs. And strangely, he became nicer to me. That scared me more than cruelty would have, because guilt often arrives dressed as affection. At first, I thought maybe we were reconnecting. Maybe middle age had frightened him. Maybe he appreciated our marriage again. Maybe, after 22 years together, people could still rediscover each other. I wanted to believe that. Because accepting betrayal means accepting the death of the life you built around someone. And that kind of grief starts before the relationship officially ends. Then the late meetings started. Then the hidden phone screen. Then the emotional distance. Not obvious. Subtle. Like someone mentally leaving before physically leaving. One night, I woke up around 1:40 a.m. and realized Daniel wasn't beside me. I found him downstairs, sitting alone in darkness, with his phone glowing against his face. The second he noticed me, he flipped the screen over. Too quickly. That tiny movement changed everything. People only hide things they fear losing. "Couldn't sleep," he said casually. I nodded, pretended to believe him, then went upstairs and cried quietly in the bathroom so my children wouldn't hear me. Because deep down, I already knew my marriage was dying. I just didn't know who was killing it. 3 weeks later, our daughter Ava turned 17. We celebrated at a restaurant downtown. Daniel spent most of dinner checking his phone, smiling slightly, typing quickly, distracted. I watched him from across the table, while Ava laughed beside him, completely unaware our family was already breaking underneath her. Then his phone lit up again, and for half a second, I saw her name, Vanessa, with a white heart beside it. That tiny white heart haunted me for weeks. Because married men do not save coworkers with hearts beside their names. At least, not innocent coworkers. Later that night, I asked casually, "Who's Vanessa?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Our acquisitions consultant." Too smooth. Too prepared. That answer sat in my chest like cold metal. But I still stayed quiet, because once you confront betrayal, your old life disappears forever. And I wasn't ready for that yet. The first person who confirmed my fears wasn't Daniel. It was Melissa, my oldest friend. We met every Thursday morning for coffee. Same cafe, same booth beside the window. She worked in legal consulting and occasionally reviewed contracts connected to Daniel's company. That morning, she looked nervous before I even sat down. I joked, "You look like you're about to arrest me." She forced a weak smile, then stirred her coffee without speaking for almost 30 seconds. Finally, she asked carefully, "Have you met Vanessa yet?" My stomach dropped instantly. Not because of the question, because of her tone. "No," I answered slowly. "Should I?" Melissa looked down at the table, and before she even spoke again, I knew my marriage was already over. "There are rumors at the office," she whispered, "about Daniel and Vanessa." Rumors. Such a tiny word for something capable of destroying an entire family. The drive home felt unreal, like my body was moving while my mind stayed behind inside that cafe. I replayed every late meeting, every hidden text, every distracted smile, every moment I ignored because trusting your husband feels safer than admitting humiliation. That afternoon, Daniel came home carrying yellow lilies, my favorite flowers. I almost laughed when I saw them, because suddenly everything felt fake. His kindness, his compliments, even the flowers looked dishonest. That night, while he showered, I checked his coat pocket. I had never done that before in 22 years. And honestly, I hated myself for it. But betrayal changes people. Inside his pocket was a parking receipt from a luxury hotel downtown. Tuesday afternoon. 3 hours. The date exposed everything. Because Tuesday afternoon was when he told me he was in investor meetings. I remember standing there in our bedroom holding that receipt while my entire body shook. But I still said nothing. Not because I was weak, because survival sometimes requires patience. And I needed proof. Real proof. Proof strong enough to survive gaslighting. Because manipulative people rarely confess when confronted. They rewrite reality instead. And Daniel was very good at rewriting reality. The gaslighting began slowly. One evening I mentioned how distant he seemed lately. Instead of answering directly, he sighed dramatically. "Elena, you overthink everything." Simple sentence. Devastating effect. That's how emotional manipulation works. It doesn't attack loudly at first. It quietly makes you question your own mind. Then came, "You've been emotional lately. You always assume the worst. You're stressed. You need to relax." After enough repetition, self-doubt becomes automatic. I started apologizing for asking questions. Imagine that. Apologizing because my husband behaved suspiciously. That's how deeply manipulation can reshape a person. Then something happened that truly frightened me. One night around 2 a.m., I found Daniel downstairs using my laptop. When I asked what he was doing, he immediately closed the screen. Looking for tax documents. But his face looked tense, cornered. The next morning, my bank flagged an attempted login from another state. That was when fear transformed into something sharper. Strategic fear. I changed every password immediately. Bank accounts, email, cloud storage, everything. I didn't tell Daniel. And 3 days later, he exploded because he couldn't access shared files. Not confusion, anger. That reaction told me more than any confession ever could. But I still didn't know how deeply Vanessa was involved. That truth arrived at the company charity gala. And honestly, that night changed me permanently. Vanessa Reed was beautiful in a very intentional way. Not warm, calculated. Everything about her looked carefully selected. Perfect hair. Perfect makeup, perfect smile, the kind of woman who studied rooms before entering them. She approached me confidently, holding champagne. "Elena," she said warmly, "I've heard so much about you." Then I smelled my perfume. Not the same brand. My actual perfume. Later that evening, when she reached into her purse, I noticed the gold scratch near the bottle cap, the exact scratch from when I dropped it years earlier in our bathroom sink. My chest turned cold instantly. Because there are coincidences. And then, there are messages. Vanessa complimented my dress, touched my arm gently, asked about my children. But something underneath her friendliness felt wrong. Predatory, almost. Then she smiled and said, "You and Daniel built such a beautiful foundation." Built. Past tense. Most people wouldn't notice that. I did. And suddenly, I understood something terrifying. She didn't think she was competing with me anymore. She thought she had already replaced me. Later that night, I overheard 2 women whispering near the restroom mirrors. She still doesn't know? She has to know. Vanessa practically lives at his condo. Condo. I nearly stopped breathing. Daniel owned no condo. At least, not that I knew about. When I confronted him the next morning, he denied everything calmly. Said Vanessa rented an apartment near the office. Said people loved gossip. Then he grabbed my hands and looked directly into my eyes. "You're becoming paranoid, Elena." That sentence nearly broke me. Because manipulative people know exactly how to weaponize your emotions. If you react emotionally, you're unstable. If you ask questions, you're insecure. If you notice lies, you're crazy. I almost apologized, until I noticed foundation makeup near his collar. Not my shade. That was the moment I realized something important. Careless liars always leave evidence behind. You just need patience long enough to see it. I hired a forensic accountant 2 weeks later. Quietly, secretly, through Melissa's legal contacts. His name was Arthur Klein. Gray hair, calm voice, sharp eyes. The kind of man who noticed everything without needing attention for it. 3 weeks later, he called me personally. "Elena," he said softly, "I think you should come in." The second I saw his expression, I knew my life was about to split into before and after. Arthur handed me a thick folder. Inside were financial records, corporate reimbursements, property transfers, consulting invoices. Then, he showed me the condo documents. Luxury downtown property, purchased 8 months earlier. Partial ownership shared between Daniel Brooks and Vanessa Reed. I couldn't breathe for several seconds. Because paperwork destroys denial. Affairs can still feel unreal until documents make them physical. Arthur continued carefully. "Your husband appears to be repositioning marital assets through consulting entities connected to Vanessa." I stared at him blankly. What does that mean? It means this affair may also involve financial manipulation. Then he showed me something worse. Daniel had been quietly moving portions of our marital assets before even discussing separation. Slowly, strategically. He wasn't just cheating. He was planning an exit. And suddenly, every flower, every compliment, every fake affectionate gesture became horrifying. He wasn't reconnecting with me. He was managing me until he secured the money. I thought it was love. I was wrong. Then, Arthur showed me another document. And that document changed everything. Daniel's late father created a family trust decades earlier, connected to company ownership protections. I remembered signing paperwork years ago, but never focused much on legal details. Arthur pointed toward one specific clause. In the event of improper transfer attempts connected to marital restructuring, original trust beneficiaries maintain acquisition rights at $1. I blinked slowly. What does that even mean? Arthur leaned back. It means if Daniel improperly leveraged trust-connected assets through hidden restructuring attempts. He paused carefully. You may legally reclaim associated controlling interests for $1. $1. At the time, I barely understood the significance, but eventually, that clause would destroy the future Vanessa thought she was building. Still, legal victories don't erase emotional pain. Because before revenge comes heartbreak. And heartbreak is quieter than movies show. It's crying silently in grocery store parking lots. It's pretending to sleep beside someone who betrayed you. It's hearing your children laugh while wondering whether their family is already broken. My son Noah noticed first. He was 19, protective, observant, too emotionally intelligent for his own good. One evening he found me crying in the kitchen. He sat beside me silently for almost a minute before asking softly, "Is Dad cheating?" I couldn't answer, because speaking truth aloud makes it real. But my silence answered for me, and watching my son's heartbreak hurt worse than Daniel's betrayal. Children carry betrayal differently. Even grown children. That's something selfish adults never understand during affairs. They think they're only risking marriages, but they're gambling entire families. And eventually, everyone pays. The worst part? Daniel still acted normal around the kids, That disturbed me more than the affair itself. He still joked with Noah about basketball, still helped Ava with college applications, still kissed my forehead in front of people. Watching someone perform love while secretly destroying your life creates a kind of emotional confusion I cannot fully explain. You start questioning every memory, every anniversary, every "I love you." You wonder whether any of it was real, or whether you simply loved harder than the other person. A week later, Noah came into my room holding his laptop. His face looked pale. "I think you need to see this." He showed me Vanessa's social media account. Most of it looked harmless at first. Travel photos, wine glasses, luxury restaurants, business conferences. But then Noah opened archived stories, and suddenly the timeline changed. There were reflections of Daniel everywhere. His watch, his hand, his shoes beside hotel beds. Tiny clues intentionally hidden in plain sight. Cruel people enjoy indirect humiliation, especially when they think they're winning. Then Noah zoomed into one image. A date. The photo had been posted during the week I was recovering from surgery. The same week Daniel claimed he was working late every night. I felt physically sick, because betrayal feels different when it overlaps with your suffering. While I needed help standing up from bed, my husband was sleeping with another woman in luxury hotels. That realization broke something inside me, permanently. But then Noah found something worse. Screenshots from a shared cloud folder Daniel forgot to disconnect years earlier. Messages, private conversations, photos, and one sentence I will never forget. Once Elena signs the restructure, everything becomes easier. Restructure, not divorce. Assets, control, money. That was the moment heartbreak transformed into clarity. Vanessa didn't just want my husband. She wanted access to money, to ownership, to the life I spent 22 years helping build. And Daniel was helping her take it. 2 weeks later, Daniel finally admitted the affair. Not because he suddenly became honest, because he realized I had evidence. He came home unusually early that evening, sat across from me at the kitchen table, and sighed dramatically, like he was the victim. I think we both know this marriage hasn't worked for a long time. Notice how people rewrite history when they betray you? Suddenly, your entire relationship becomes broken. Suddenly, their cheating becomes understandable. Necessary, even. I looked at him quietly, then asked, "How long?" He hesitated. "That's not important." That answer told me everything. Because innocent people answer directly. Manipulative people manage information. I repeated the question. "How long?" "About 6 months." Lie. I already knew it had been much longer. Then he reached for my hand. "Elena, I never wanted to hurt you." I almost laughed, because people who don't want to hurt you usually stop before months of lying, cheating, and financial manipulation. Then he said something that changed everything. "I want this divorce to stay respectful." Respectful. After secretly moving assets, after humiliating me publicly, after helping another woman position herself inside our finances. That word nearly made me lose control. But instead of screaming, I asked quietly, "Does Vanessa know about the trust clause?" The color drained from his face instantly. Tiny reaction, barely visible, but enough. "What clause?" he asked carefully. That was when I smiled for the first time in months, and I think that smile scared him more than any emotional breakdown ever could. Because suddenly, he realized something terrifying. I knew more than he expected. Maybe not everything, but enough. That night he barely slept. I heard him pacing downstairs until sunrise. The next morning, his lawyer contacted mine. That speed confirmed panic. And that was when everything changed, forever. The legal war began quietly. No screaming, no dramatic courtroom speeches, just paperwork, emails, deadlines, financial disclosures. And honestly, that scared me more. Because real destruction rarely arrives loudly. It arrives in organized folders. 3 weeks after Daniel admitted the affair, his attorney sent over the first settlement proposal. I remember sitting beside Melissa at her office conference table while reading it. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the pages. The proposal painted me like an emotionally unstable wife who needed financial simplification. That phrase still makes me sick. Financial simplification. As if 22 years of marriage could be reduced to accounting language. But then I noticed something strange. Several assets were missing. Important assets. Investment accounts. Corporate distributions. A property development interest. At first, I thought it was an oversight. Then Arthur leaned back in his chair and said quietly, "No, this is intentional." That was the moment I fully understood something terrifying. Daniel wasn't just leaving me. He was trying to erase me financially. And Vanessa was helping him do it. Over the next month, Arthur uncovered hidden transfers connected to shell consulting entities tied to Vanessa's acquisition work. The deeper he investigated, the uglier things became. There were fake invoices, duplicate reimbursements, strange consulting fees, money moving in circles through companies that barely existed on paper, and almost all of it connected back to Vanessa. One evening, Arthur called me after midnight. "Elena," he said carefully, "I think you should prepare yourself emotionally." My chest tightened instantly. What happened? "There's another property." Another property. I felt physically numb. Because apparently one hidden condo wasn't enough. This property was different, though. Smaller. Older. Purchased under a limited liability corporation connected indirectly to Vanessa. But the mortgage payments traced back to Daniel's corporate distributions. Arthur believed they planned to use it later as a temporary residence during divorce proceedings. In simple words, they had already planned their future together, while I still believed my marriage could be saved. I sat awake until almost 4 a.m, staring at our wedding photo on the bedroom wall. 22 years. Gone. Not because of one mistake. Because of hundreds of deliberate choices. That realization changes you. People survive accidents differently than intentional betrayal. And this was intentional. Every lie, every touch, every fake smile. Intentional. Then came the public humiliation. Affairs become uglier once secrecy disappears. Vanessa stopped hiding completely. She started attending corporate events openly with Daniel. Restaurants, business dinners, charity functions, and every appearance felt intentional. Like she wanted people to watch me being replaced. The worst moment happened at the company holiday gala. I almost refused to go, but Melissa stopped me. "You cannot disappear," she said firmly. "Women like Vanessa count on that." So I went, and the second I entered the ballroom, I saw them. Daniel and Vanessa standing together near the stage, laughing, while several executives surrounded them. Vanessa was wearing white. Not cream, not silver. White. Like a bride. The symbolism made me nauseous. Then something even worse happened. One executive's wife approached me sympathetically and whispered, "I'm so sorry." Sorry. That single word humiliated me more than gossip ever could. Because it meant everyone already knew. Everyone except the woman desperately trying to save her marriage. I spent nearly an hour pretending I was fine, smiling, nodding, performing dignity while my entire body shook internally. Then Vanessa approached me directly, confident, elegant, cold underneath the smile. "Elena," she said sweetly, "you look beautiful tonight." I stared at her quietly, and for the first time, I truly saw her. Not as competition, not as the other woman, but as someone deeply empty. Because secure women do not build happiness from another woman's destruction. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "You deserve someone who truly loves you." That sentence nearly shattered my self-control, because the cruelty was intentional, carefully measured. But before I could respond, another voice interrupted. "You should leave her alone." We both turned. It was Claire, the woman from Vanessa's consulting team. Vanessa's expression changed instantly. For 1 second, her mask slipped, and underneath the polished confidence, I saw fear. That was the beginning of the end. Claire contacted me privately 3 days later. We met at a diner outside downtown. She looked terrified, hands shaking around her coffee cup. The first thing she said was, "Vanessa has done this before." My chest tightened instantly. Claire explained that Vanessa specifically targeted financially vulnerable executives during periods of transition. Divorces, inheritance disputes, corporate restructuring. She researched ownership structures before relationships became serious. At first, I didn't believe it. It sounded too calculated, too cold. But then Claire handed me printed emails, internal messages, fake consulting invoices, discussions about asset positioning. And one sentence made my blood run cold. "Elena is emotionally dependent. She'll settle quietly." Emotionally dependent. Like I was a legal inconvenience instead of a human being. That sentence changed me permanently. Because until that moment, I was still emotionally reacting as a wife. After reading those emails, I started thinking strategically, and strategic women are dangerous. Claire also revealed something critical. Vanessa believed Daniel would eventually gain controlling leverage through divorce settlement pressure. In other words, she thought she was marrying into power. But she misunderstood one thing completely: the trust. Daniel's father never fully trusted his son financially. Years earlier, Daniel nearly destroyed part of the company through reckless investments. His father quietly protected major assets through trust structures connected partially to me. Not Daniel. Me. Vanessa didn't know that, and Daniel apparently forgot how strong those protections actually were. That mistake would eventually destroy both of them. The first official hearing happened 2 months later. And honestly, courtrooms are less dramatic than people imagine. Most destruction happens quietly through paperwork: emails, dates, signatures, financial trails. Daniel looked exhausted already. Not guilty, exhausted. Because lies require maintenance. Meanwhile, truth only requires patience. Vanessa attended wearing expensive designer suits and fake confidence. But I noticed something interesting. She stopped wearing my perfume. Maybe because she finally understood she was never stepping into my life. She was stepping into a disaster she helped create. Arthur's forensic team presented evidence methodically. concealed transfers, duplicate invoices, improper reimbursements. Then came the condo. The luxury condo, partially financed through redirected company funds. Vanessa's lawyer objected immediately, but the documents were real, and documents don't care about emotions. Then Arthur revealed something devastating. Several transfers happened before separation discussions officially began. Legally, that mattered enormously. The dates exposed everything, especially intent. The courtroom atmosphere changed instantly. Even Daniel looked nervous. Then came the inheritance issue. Our attorney explained the trust clause carefully, and suddenly Vanessa's legal team looked confused. Then alarmed. Because the strategy they built depended entirely on projected ownership leverage, Daniel no longer legally controlled. That was when the $1 acquisition rights officially entered proceedings. The room went silent. Even the judge requested clarification. Our attorney explained that improper restructuring attempts tied to protected trust assets activated beneficiary recovery rights. In simple words, I could reclaim associated controlling interests for $1. $1. The exact amount Vanessa's future eventually collapsed over. After the hearing, Daniel cornered me outside the courthouse. For the first time in months, he looked genuinely afraid. "Elena, please," he whispered. Vanessa didn't understand the trust. I stared at him in disbelief. That was his concern? Not our children, not our marriage, not the lies? Vanessa. I answered quietly. She understood enough to help you steal from your family. Then I walked away. That night, Daniel called 14 times. I ignored every call. Then Ava came into my room crying. She had seen social media comments, rumors, speculation, teenagers at school discussing her father's affair publicly. That broke me more than anything else. Because children should never pay for adult selfishness. She sat on my bed shaking. Did Dad really choose her over us? That question nearly destroyed me. And honestly, there's no good answer to that. Because cheating is never just romantic betrayal. It's abandonment, of trust, of family, of emotional safety. I held Ava while she cried for nearly an hour. And in that moment, I realized something important. Daniel wasn't the victim of temptation. He was a man willing to risk his children's emotional security for validation. That clarity changed how I saw him forever. A month later, another bomb exploded. Vanessa announced she was pregnant, at least publicly. Social media posts appeared almost immediately. Cryptic captions, baby shoes, celebration dinners. And suddenly, public opinion shifted again. People started portraying them as some tragic love story, like I was simply the bitter wife refusing to let go. The humiliation became unbearable. Even worse, Daniel suddenly pushed aggressively for settlement negotiations. Fast, urgent, suspiciously urgent. Arthur immediately sensed something was wrong. Then, he uncovered another hidden document. Vanessa's condo refinancing depended heavily on projected settlement outcomes, and a pregnancy narrative increased sympathy leverage during negotiations. That was when Arthur asked one terrifying question. Has anyone actually confirmed the pregnancy medically? 3 weeks later, the answer arrived. No medical records existed. No doctor verification. Nothing. Then Claire contacted me again. Vanessa had privately admitted she was late, but never medically confirmed anything. The pregnancy announcement was strategic pressure, a manipulation tactic. And when Daniel discovered the truth, everything between them started collapsing. We obtained text messages during discovery, arguments, accusations, financial panic. One message from Daniel said, "You promised me this would work." That sentence haunted me because it revealed everything. Neither of them built their relationship on love. They built it on fantasy, money, escape, ego. And fantasies collapse the second reality arrives. Then came the board investigation. The company launched internal reviews after Arthur's findings entered official proceedings. Suddenly, Daniel's reputation started collapsing publicly. Executives distanced themselves. Investors became nervous. And Vanessa? She vanished from public events almost overnight. But the biggest shock came from Daniel's mother. She requested a private meeting with me. I hadn't seen her since the separation. We met at her house one rainy afternoon. She looked older, sadder. And the first thing she said was, "I warned his father this would happen someday." That sentence stunned me. She explained that Daniel always chased admiration more than stability, even as a teenager. He loved attention, validation, excitement, but responsibility bored him. His father recognized that weakness early, which was why the trust protections existed, to protect the company, the family, and eventually, me. Then she handed me an envelope. Inside were old, handwritten letters from Daniel's father. One sentence made me cry instantly. Elena sees people clearly when Daniel only sees himself. After months of gaslighting and manipulation, someone finally reminded me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I wasn't emotionally dependent. I was simply loyal to people who didn't deserve it. And that realization changed everything. The final stage of the divorce should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like surviving a fire. Because by then, I understood something nobody talks about enough. Even when you win against betrayal, you still mourn the life you thought you had. And grief does not disappear just because truth finally exposes people. It simply changes shape. By the time the second court review began, Daniel looked completely different. Older, tired, nervous in ways I had never seen before. For 22 years, I watched him move through life confidently. He always believed he could charm his way through consequences. But charm stops working once paperwork starts speaking louder than personality. And the paperwork was devastating. Arthur's team uncovered more hidden financial activity tied to Vanessa's consulting firms. Fake invoices, corporate reimbursements disguised as acquisition support, personal expenses buried under business categories. And one transaction changed everything. A payment tied directly to a future property investment proposal. The proposal listed projected ownership structures, Daniel's name, Vanessa's name, and projected marital asset outcomes based on estimated divorce settlements. In simple words, they had already planned their financial future while I was still sleeping beside my husband, believing we were fixing our marriage. I remember staring at that document so long, my eyes blurred. Because betrayal feels different when you realize people discussed your future like a business strategy. Not a family. Not children. Not a human life. A strategy. And suddenly, every memory became contaminated. Every vacation, every anniversary, every family photo. I started wondering whether Daniel had already emotionally left years earlier. That question haunted me for months. Then something unexpected happened. Vanessa turned on Daniel. At first, it appeared small. Subtle legal disagreements, delayed responses, separate attorneys. but Arthur noticed the shift immediately. "They're protecting themselves from each other now," he said quietly. And honestly, that didn't surprise me. Relationships built on deception eventually collapse under pressure, because trust cannot grow from betrayal, no matter how romantic people try to make it look. Then we received new discovery materials, private messages between Vanessa and one of her friends, and those messages exposed everything. One line made my stomach turn cold. Daniel was supposed to secure the restructuring faster. Supposed to. Not hoped to. Not dreamed to. Supposed to. Like my marriage was merely a delayed transaction. Then came another message. He's becoming emotional and difficult. Emotional. That word nearly made me laugh, because the same man who spent years calling me too emotional had now become inconvenient to the woman he betrayed me for. That's the irony of affairs nobody discusses. Eventually, the liar becomes difficult to trust, even for the person they cheated with. Especially for them. Because if someone betrays their family for you, deep down, you know they're capable of betraying you too. And that fear poisons everything. Around that time, Noah stopped speaking to his father completely. Not dramatically. Quietly. Which honestly hurt Daniel more. Noah simply stopped answering calls, stopped replying to texts, stopped pretending respect still existed. One evening, Daniel showed up unexpectedly at the house while Noah was home from college. I heard them arguing downstairs. At first softly, then louder. Then suddenly Noah shouted something I will never forget. "You didn't just cheat on Mom." Silence. "You lied to all of us." That sentence hit harder than anything else. Because children experience betrayal differently than spouses. Spouses question love. Children question safety, trust, identity. Family becomes unstable after affairs. Even for adult children. Then Noah said something else. "You made her feel crazy while you planned another life." I stood frozen upstairs, listening. Because that was exactly what happened. Daniel didn't just betray me physically. He manipulated my reality while secretly building a future with another woman. And hearing my son recognize that truth shattered me emotionally. A few minutes later, Daniel left the house without another word. Noah came upstairs afterward, looking exhausted. For the first time since childhood, he hugged me and cried. And honestly, that hurt more than anything Vanessa ever did. Because watching your children lose faith in someone they loved changes a family forever. Ava handled things differently. She became quieter, withdrawn, careful. One night I found her deleting photos from social media, family vacations, birthday dinners, Christmas mornings, all disappearing one by one. "What are you doing?" I asked softly. She shrugged without looking at me. "I don't want reminders." That sentence nearly broke me. Because affairs don't only destroy marriages, they poison memories. And children shouldn't have to erase pieces of their lives just to survive emotional pain created by adults. Then Ava looked at me and whispered, "Was any of it real?" I didn't know how to answer. Because honestly, I was asking myself the same question every night. The board investigation intensified shortly afterward. Executives who once admired Daniel started distancing themselves publicly. Phone calls stopped. Invitations disappeared. People protect themselves quickly when scandals threaten money. And the scandal was growing, especially after Arthur uncovered evidence suggesting Vanessa used company resources for personal financial positioning. Then came the media leak. Someone inside the company anonymously released information about the investigation. Nothing fully detailed, but enough. Rumors spread online almost instantly. Corporate misconduct, improper financial transfers, executive affairs scandal. And suddenly Vanessa disappeared completely from social media. No more luxury dinners. No more cryptic captions. No more smiling photos beside wine glasses. The fantasy image she carefully built started collapsing publicly. And honestly, watching that happen didn't bring satisfaction. Only sadness. Because once illusions die, reality becomes ugly for everyone involved. Then came the biggest revelation of all. Arthur discovered a draft agreement hidden inside archived legal correspondence. A draft created nearly 9 months before Daniel officially discussed separation. 9 months. The document outlined projected asset restructuring scenarios after anticipated marital dissolution. Anticipated. In other words, Daniel was planning financially for divorce while still sleeping beside me every night, pretending we were fine. I stared at that document for almost an hour, without speaking. Because there's something uniquely cruel about discovering someone emotionally left long before they physically admitted it. That level of deception changes your understanding of love permanently. Then, Arthur pointed toward another detail. Projected leverage assumptions tied directly to trust-linked ownership. Vanessa's entire financial future depended on Daniel gaining control he legally never possessed. That was the fatal mistake. They built plans around assets protected years earlier by Daniel's father. Protections Daniel barely remembered. But those protections would now destroy everything. That was when Arthur finally explained the acquisition enforcement in full detail. Under the trust structure, improper transfer attempts connected to concealed restructuring activated recovery rights for original beneficiaries, meaning me. And once enforcement finalized, associated ownership leverage transferred back under protected control. For $1. $1. The amount sounded almost ridiculous. But legally, it was devastating. Because Vanessa's financial planning depended heavily on projected future ownership leverage. Once that disappeared, everything connected to it collapsed too. Loans, refinancing, investment projections, all of it. And suddenly, the woman who thought she stole a wealthy future discovered she attached herself to a financial disaster instead. The final courtroom hearing happened 6 months after the affair became public. Vanessa looked completely different by then. Tired, anxious, angry. The polished confidence was gone, because maintaining fake perfection becomes impossible under pressure. Daniel looked even worse. Not because he lost money, because he lost control. And people like Daniel survive by controlling narratives. But the truth had become too large to manage anymore. Arthur's final evidence presentation destroyed the remaining defense arguments. Backdated invoices, misused consulting structures, asset concealment, improper transfer attempts. Then came the final acquisition enforcement filing. Simple paperwork, devastating consequences. Under trust protections, I legally reclaimed associated controlling interests. For $1. $1 destroyed the fantasy Vanessa spent years constructing. The condo refinancing collapsed almost immediately afterward. Banks froze evaluations. Investors backed away. And Daniel's corporate influence disappeared within weeks. The company board removed him, pending permanent review. Everything they built together started collapsing publicly. And the strangest part? I felt almost nothing. No triumph, no excitement. Just exhaustion. Because revenge sounds satisfying until you survive betrayal. Then mostly, you just want peace. After the hearing, Vanessa approached me outside the courthouse alone. No expensive jewelry, no perfect makeup, no polished confidence. Just anger. "You ruined our future," she snapped. I looked at her quietly for several seconds, then answered honestly. "No." I paused. "You built your future on lies." It collapsed under its own weight. She looked like she wanted to scream, but there was nothing left to say. Because truth eventually corners everyone, even manipulative people. Especially manipulative people. Then she asked one final question. "Did you ever really love him?" That surprised me, and for a moment, I actually felt sad for her. Because women who chase married men often mistake possession for love. So I answered truthfully. Yes. I swallowed hard. But loving someone doesn't mean they deserve access to your life forever. That was the last conversation we ever had. Daniel tried contacting me for months afterward. At first to argue, then to explain, then eventually to apologize. But apologies without accountability are just emotional recycling, and I was finally too healthy to participate in that cycle anymore. So I stopped answering completely. Closure does not require continued access. That lesson changed my life. Slowly, things became quieter, healthier, real again. Noah smiled more. Ava stopped crying herself to sleep. I started sleeping through entire nights without checking phones or bank statements. Peace returned slowly, like sunlight after years of storm clouds. A year later, I sold the family house, not because I lost everything, because I deserved new memories. I bought a smaller home near the water. Nothing extravagant, but peaceful. Mine. No lies attached to it. The first night there, I sat alone on the back porch, listening to waves crash quietly in the distance. And for the first time in almost 2 years, I felt safe. Not because someone loved me, because I finally loved myself enough to stop accepting less than honesty. That realization healed parts of me I thought were permanently broken. Sometimes people ask if I hate Vanessa. Honestly, not anymore. Hate keeps people emotionally connected, and I spent too many years emotionally tied to people who only valued me when I was useful. Now I value peace more than revenge. But I also value truth. And the truth is this: Vanessa didn't destroy my marriage alone. She exposed a man already willing to betray his family. Daniel made those choices himself. That lesson took years to accept. Still, I'll never forget the moment the judge finalized the acquisition enforcement. $1. That single dollar represented something far bigger than revenge. It represented boundaries, proof that careful women are not weak women. Proof that silence is not stupidity. Proof that surviving betrayal can still lead somewhere beautiful. I lost a marriage, but I found myself. And honestly, that was worth more than everything Daniel and Vanessa tried to take. If this story hit you, subscribe and tell me in the comments, what would you have done?